Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to be here speaking for the first time ever at Scottish Summit about how companies are creating great customer-centric experiences with Dynamics 365. But first, a huge hat tip to our sponsors, ScriptRunner, DQ Global, Proximo 3, RedSpire, Agilysys, and Hitachi Solutions. You are the folks who make these great events possible. Thank you so much for your commitment. Thank you so much for sponsoring this great event. We've got a ton of content to cover in only 45 minutes, so let's dive in. And to do this, I actually want to take you back in time to talk about the future of customer relationships. It helps to have a frame of reference that starts in the past, and quite a ways in the past, actually, in the year 1840. Because you see, at that time, just like we were undergoing a revolution of sorts now, we were undergoing the Industrial Revolution then. And cities were actually struggling under the challenges that were being presented to them at that time. Large groups of people were moving to cities, to urban centers for the promise of a great future, of great jobs, of great options for their families, and great communities to live in. But cities were not doing a good job of keeping up with the growth. In fact, that urban problem was causing all sorts of sanitation conditions, mortality rates among the young, crime rates that were just unacceptable in those cities. And it was creating a great deal of social unrest. Now, Chicago, Illinois at that time was actually one of the smaller cities in the country. In fact, it was the 92nd largest, so barely made the top 100 list of cities in terms of size in the United States of America at that time. But Chicago, looking around, decided to do something that was future thinking. And what they did was they actually put the very first comprehensive sewage system that was installed in any city in the United States of America. It was quite a move at the time, something unexpected, something a lot of people debated whether it made sense or not. Now, Baltimore, Maryland, by contrast, was a shining city on a hill. It was the second largest city in the United States of America at that time, if you can believe that. It was a port town. It was also strategically positioned very close to Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York. So Baltimore said, our future is secure. We don't need to do this. And by the way, we have a lot of legacy architecture already installed in our city. It would be very painful for us to start to do something like Chicago did. So Baltimore, Maryland, by contrast, was actually the last major city in the United States of America to install a comprehensive sewage system. Now, if you look at the growth charts for those two cities, you can see the impact that those decisions had on the size and growth and ability of those cities to keep up with the population that lived in those cities. The lesson learned? I've always wanted to use a poop emoji in a presentation. I finally had an excuse to do it. But the reality is, when businesses follow suit, when businesses don't keep up with their customers and employees, bad situations arise from that too, just like they arose for Baltimore, Maryland. So that's what we're going to talk about today is in this session, what are companies doing to get past that, to actually be working towards the future of better relationships with their customers. A very quick introduction to me. My name is Geoff Ables. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm an advisor to our clients. I started our company called C5 Insight back around the year 2002, and I geek out on this stuff. I love thinking about how you bring this digital world and the human world together to do relationships better, not to get rid of the physical part of relationships, the in-person part of relationships. It's always been important, but to augment that, to take us broader and deeper with each other as human beings and as businesses with human beings than we ever could have before. I've written a couple of books. I hope to write some more books on the topic at some point in the future. There's some of my information. If you want to connect to me on social media, I'd love that. Share a little bit of insight about yourself. That's my Twitter handle. I'm real easy to find on LinkedIn too because my name is has a pretty unique spelling. Okay, so back to what we were talking about before. When it comes to Dynamics 365 and CRM and becoming more customer centric, a lot of organizations kind of think of it as an easy button, right? They think that I'm in this caterpillar state and I want to transform into the future of customer experiences and customer engagement and better customer relationships. So I go and buy a solution. I buy a solution like Dynamics 365 for sales, for instance. And that's my easy button, right? Once I install that and implement it, I will now be agile. I will now be a butterfly. I will now be customer centric. And so they push that button and they push it and they push it and they push it. And if you've been on the receiving end of that button being pushed, you've probably started to realize that maybe it doesn't say easy on that button after all, right? It's not as easy as everyone thinks it is. And so that's what I want to talk about today, because the truth is that the struggle is real. You don't just buy an application and suddenly you're customer centric any more than you install SharePoint and you're employee centric, collaborative, or anything like that. It's a process, it's a journey, it's an ongoing set of things. And what we have found is most organizations think of CRM as another technology project. But at their heart, CRM projects are people first. And most legacy projects have been more task first. And there's nothing wrong with those projects being task first, and there's still a lot of important task first projects that are happening out there. But the way you manage a people first, a people centric project is very different from the way you manage a task centric project. And that's where people get off on this so often, off course, and miss what they could have done. So the cool thing about this that we're going to talk about today is there are 5 really well proven principles for becoming more people centric in your organization, both at the technology level and at the individual human level. We at our company have studied this for a long time. We've done some of our own research. We've looked at other research. We've certainly worked with many, many clients and have come to these conclusions about these 5 principles. And the cool thing about these 5 principles are these are the same principles that lead to better human relationships anywhere. The difference is businesses have to do these at scale, right? The way you and I develop a relationship with each other one on one, it's really the same way that a business develops relationships with its customers. But a business has to put the tools in place to do this at scale and feel like it's one relationship with the customer to the customer, not 20,000 people in the business trying to have a relationship with the customer. So let's dive in and talk about those 5 principles. The first principle is a principle of listening. Right? We know this is true of any human relationship. Relationships don't start by talking, they start by listening, by sitting down and getting to know somebody and not just listening, but writing down what we hear on the notebook of our mind, right? Remembering what we hear, putting it in our big human database. And that's what businesses need to do too, right? They have a database, but it's a shared database where everyone's listening and they need to record the information in that database. The problem is it's not just one database. In fact, this research from Microsoft suggests that it's well over 20 databases, well over 20 different places we write down information we capture about relationships to reference later. And of course, not everybody in the organization has access to all of those different systems. So, what does this really mean? Is this really a hindrance? How is this changing how we relate to customers? Well, according to this bit of research we've done, it actually has a very direct bearing. Employee satisfaction drops notably when you go from 2 systems, just 2, to 3 or more. Now, we didn't have statistical sampling size to break it up after 3, but presumably the more you have after 3, the more employee satisfaction drops. Why is that? Because employees, the way one of our clients put it is, I feel like I'm the machine. I feel like I have to do the work a computer should do because I've got to learn all these different applications to go cobble together this picture of the customer so I can serve them well. I'm devalued as a human and I'm not able to live up to my highest and best purpose because I'm having to manipulate machines all the time to do this. I'm becoming this data entry monster. Absolute impact on employee satisfaction, which of course then reflects on the customer experience. Now, a lot of people would respond, okay, I guess maybe then we need to give our employees fewer places they need to listen. What we have found is exactly the opposite. Customers are talking to us on more and more channels all the time. And across our employee bases, we're having to communicate through more and more channels all the time. And when we try to reduce those, we're actually eliminating channels that people want to use to communicate. So we need to continue to listen in more places. That will be our ongoing challenge. Probably from the time I started this session to the time I end this session, there will be some other new social channel or new groundbreaking way to assimilate information about each other and customers. And we need to look at using those as businesses. I'm not saying all businesses have to use all of them. There are some that are right or wrong in different cases. But what we need to do, and what the successful are doing exceptionally well, is they're figuring out how to remember in fewer, right? Just because I have five senses where I can sense the world around me doesn't mean I have to have five brains to store that information. Have one place to store how I'm experiencing the world. And businesses more and more need to do that. The successful, the leaders, the ones who are going past the challenge and getting ahead of everyone else, they are doing a better and better job of this. Now, this is a long-term roadmap. You're not going to get there quickly. You may never get there completely. And I'm not suggesting you have one database with everything in it per se, although data lakes and data warehouses are making that somewhat of a reality. But what I am saying is, at least per job role, move more and more towards one system of record for one job role. Fewer systems for people to have to go to get all the information they need to serve the customer in the best possible way. Now, one example of how one company has done that. So this organization was a professional services company, still is a professional services company, and they wanted to drive this kind of behavior, right? You're probably familiar with a pipeline. A pipeline is where you put prospects and leads in the top, you gradually qualify them, you send them marketing material, you give them quotes and proposals, and eventually at the bottom of the pipeline, at the bottom of the funnel, they become a new client. Now, for this particular organization, they were doing what a lot of organizations typically do. Marketing was generating some leads, and there were also some referrals coming in, largely sales generated referrals, but some were coming in through partners in this professional services firm as well. And since they constantly wanted to do a better job of generating new clients, they would regularly ask, where are these new clients coming from? And they would get this answer in general that mostly from their salespeople that, hey, we feel like it's the 80-20 rule, right? About 80% of them are these referrals, and about 20% of them are leads that are generated through these various different marketing programs and content marketing and stuff like that that we're doing. And so they said that's fine. So they built their strategy around that. They built their investments around that. They built their budget around that. And essentially, they put less emphasis on marketing, more and more emphasis on referrals, until one day they made an investment in Dynamics 365, both sales and marketing. And as they started to measure things over a period of time, it took a while to accumulate the data. One of the very first things they found was the exact opposite was true as what people had been telling them. Now, no one was deliberately lying to them. It was just their gut level impression, because if you've ever worked with referrals, referrals generally feel great. When someone refers someone to you, you have a better opening conversation, you don't spend a lot of time proving credibility, and you tend to close those more efficiently. But you also tend to not get very many of those referrals. And as they looked at this, they said, yes, referrals close faster and we want to get more of them, but we get many, 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 many more marketing generated leads. And in fact, we close about 80% more new client business from these leads than we do from these referrals. It absolutely turned things upside down for them. It was also a painful lesson because they looked back in history and realized for years we have been budgeting incorrectly, and we are paying the price for that. We are not as big of a company as we could be. But once they began to do this, it began to then accelerate their sales pipeline, accelerate the actual growth of the company. And now they're very excited because they can go to the next level. This was just the easy question to ask. Now they can begin to ask all these other questions about what happens throughout this process. How do we do it better? How many calls does it take to actually get someone to request a quote? How many calls does it take to get them to close that quote? How can we predict on the front end if someone's likely to become a customer or likely to never actually do business with us? And by the way, those referrals, we know they're good. We just would like to get more of them. Where are they coming from? Can we find lookalikes? What can we do to be more proactive about it? The list goes on and on. And by listening to customers throughout the life cycle, everything from a click of an email to a response to a sales proposal and all points in between, they're able to now answer these questions with facts and numbers instead of gut level feelings. The second principle of human relationships is this principle of understanding, right? Stephen Covey said, our problem is not that we don't listen, it's that we listen with the intent to reply rather than with the intent to truly understand the other person. And we do this in business all the time, right? Listening, that's the data principle. Understanding, that's the analytics principle. Now, when we talk about analytics, this is what we tend to think about, right? We have all this big data out here, and according to this IBM research information, analyzing that big data, that might be the biggest driving force that differentiates customer companies that are successful from companies that struggle, right? You can see companies that are the most successful in the world are better at accessing data, drawing insights out of data, and translating those insights into action. But what we don't tend to talk about is this. Yes, we have big data. Yes, we know big data is growing fast. In fact, when we look at it, we can kind of see how quickly we're getting into more and more data. 2 years from now, we'll have doubled the amount of data available to us as business people over what we have today. That's big data. It's overwhelming. It's kind of exciting. We do talk about that. This is the part we don't talk about. Of all that data that's coming in corporate information systems and CRM systems are the worst at this. Between 53 and 80% of it is bad data. The acronym is RODI. It's redundant, outdated, trivial, inaccurate, or incomplete. So 2 years from now, you're going to have twice the amount of data that you have today. But guess what? The majority of that data is probably going to be bad data. And if you have bad data plugged into big data systems, guess what you do? You make bad decisions. So what are the leaders doing about this? How are they addressing big data? How are they addressing dirty data? We've probably all got some sort of pack rat or hoarder in our life, right? I actually just went on vacation up to a place called the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, and right across the street from where I was living, there was a glass enclosed patio, and it looked a lot like this. I couldn't even see if anybody was in it. Floor to ceiling, it was stacked with junk that looked like this. Now, the reality is, as a business society, we have become data hoarders. And what I've run into with many clients are organizations that say, well, data cleanliness is everybody's responsibility. My experience is if data cleanliness is everyone's responsibility, it's actually nobody's responsibility at all. So the leaders out there are saying, we need to have a data steward. This point was driven home to me in a simple way when we were meeting with a law firm. And one of the partners in the law firm, when they were talking about this issue, said, you know what I think we should do with our data? We should be responsible for it just like we're responsible for our physical workspace. So, everyone takes turn cleaning the toilets and vacuuming the floors and emptying the trash cans, right? And someone, of course, immediately said, well, no, nobody does that. That would be a complete waste of our time. We're very high paid people. Why would we spend our time doing that? And that other partner said, you're right. I absolutely agree with you. So why are we sitting here talking about how each of us can keep our data clean when really there are other people who have the time and talents and automated processes to make that work for us? And in their case, they said, we're absolutely outsourcing this. There are ways to get this taken care of. Sort of like an office, yes, we have to be responsible for our own desktop, but the rest of our office, we need librarians, we need data stewards who can help us with it. Other firms we're working with actually have insourced it and do it themselves. One case study for how one organization did this. First of all, this organization realized that the most important information they could have available for building better relationships come from two sources: interactions and transactions, right? Transactions are just what did people actually buy from us? How did they behave? How much money did they spend? What products did they spend it on? What channel did they buy it from? How often are they buying those things? All of those things. Super valuable data locked up in ERP systems. The other side of it was interactional information. That's what I talked about in one of my earlier case studies. That's this idea of who did they talk to? How often did they talk? How much did they click on our website? Are they opening our emails? How are they interacting with us? What is their behavior that we can actually see and track and measure about a relationship with these folks? And when they looked at that, when you look at the middle box on the slide, one of the things they realized was it's challenging to get our people to enter interactional information into the system. It's beneficial. There's a lot of metrics and benefits to it, as you can see on the left side. And actually, I have a whole separate session talking about activity and interaction data at the end of the day today. So they said, we're going to put together an initiative around data stewardship, and we're going to build it around this idea of MDM, Master Data Management. For them, it was a five-pronged approach. They said, first of all, we need to figure out what the system of record is, where information belongs. No more syncing information between systems and saying, enter it wherever you want, and we'll keep it in sync. Minimize that as much as possible and instead say, this is where this type of information gets entered. This is the kind of person who owns it. And yes, it will integrate with other systems, but this is the system of record where it gets entered. Then they went through a process of integrate. Let's move that information back and forth and make it available. But something else that they called eliminate. And essentially, they said, we're going to have to make some hard decisions about moving where we do things. One of those hard decisions for them was they said, you know what, quoting and ordering, we have done it in our ERP system for years and years. We need to do it somewhere else. So they actually took the initiative and moved that information into their CRM, their Dynamics 365 system. Why? Because they said quoting and order entry, those are customer facing activities. People who are customer facing should do those things. People who are customer facing should be using our Dynamics for sales, Dynamics for customer service solutions, not our back-end ERP solution. So they moved those systems over there. Automation. They said, how can we automate as much of this as we possibly can? They set up integration with systems, everything from LinkedIn to Inside View. They set up workflows to do some jobs, keeping data updated automatically. They do some ongoing reporting and those kinds of things, saying, let's take as much of the responsibility off of our users as possible, but let's own that we can't take it all. So we have to have ownership. We're going to create those data steward roles, and we have to have accountability. All users are going to be entering some information and updating some information. So they created reports that they network into their weekly meeting cadence with every customer facing person in the organization. Different people had different reports and different discussions to make sure they were constantly monitoring and improving that. The third rule of relationships that differentiates those that succeed from those that struggle is this principle of connecting. So connecting is at the heart of relationships, right? It's where the action is, but it's not really what most people think the action is. But it's not really what most people think the action is. When you think about it, you can see these people are enjoying a glass of fine wine together. Now, you may have noticed when wine lovers get together, not everybody, but in different countries and different cultures, you see this with more prevalence. When different people get together and they raise their glasses, they clink them together, and they make a brief moment of eye contact when they say cheers, right? They don't kind of look the other way. They look right in the eye and say cheers before they take a sip out of their wine. Why do they do that? Well, it's because when people come together to enjoy a beautiful wine, it's a reminder that it's not about drinking, it's about an excuse to bring people together in relationship. That's the way I like to think about it. But the other way to think about it is that's just a process. It's a habit. Any one of us can establish the habit of that brief moment of eye contact after your glasses touch to create a more human relationship between you and someone else. You see, human relationships, yes, there are some who are naturally better at it, but they're really a process. And connecting is about process. It's not this intuitive, God given gift. It's something we can all improve and do better with. And the best companies in the world have figured that out. Here's just a few statistics about the impact of process on human relationships, whether that be with customer to company, whether that be employee to employee, whether that be sales or service or marketing, whether that just be process in general. Statistic after statistic says relationships matter, but process behind relationships matters too. So one of the things we have found is organizations that do this well have reinvented how they think about processes. I started this section of these slides saying people-centric processes are different. This is where we really drive that home. Organizations that are doing people first well are looking at that saying, these are not rigid processes. These are much more flexible than what we're used to. We need to use design thinking. We need to use out of the box approaches to say it doesn't happen the same way every time. If we're going to be customer driven, we've got to let them do a lot of the leading. They can't be inside of our box, but we got to be prepared for whatever direction they might want to go. So here's the way one organization did it. So this is a global manufacturer, and they employed something called Dynamics 365 Field Service. Now, one of the things they were able to do with that is they put IoT, Internet of Things, monitoring devices in every one of the pieces of equipment that they manufacture and that they sell and then service down the road. Those IoT devices can actually monitor what's going on in real time so they can start to do things like say, this device looks like it might be about to have a failure. They can then remotely interact with that device, sometimes doing a reset to actually get the device working without anybody ever visiting at all. But if they do need to have somebody visit, they can then use the field service dispatching service among their customer service representatives to say, let's find the right person to be dispatched to this based on their location, based on their availability, based on their unique skill set, and let's get them automatically scheduled to go service this device, sometimes before the customer ever even knows the device is having a failure or is at risk of being about to have a failure. Those field service people then can then use their mobile devices not only to just find where they need to go and be alerted that they've got something to do, but to actually process their work orders, to purchase things while they're out in the field, to get a customer to process their credit card with them, to get a customer to agree that service has been done through a signature all right there on premise. They're even starting to look at some of the augmented reality so that centralized experts can actually guide decentralized people who have skill but may not have the specific depth of subject matter expertise that central people do to walk them through helping them to keep equipment up and running without that small group of experts having to travel all over the world to get their jobs done. Fourth principle relationships is this idea of knowing the results and continuously improving. Now, I think of this largely as continuously improving, but I also think of it as something else because the best companies in the world that do this well, they know the score, but they also share the score and they give every person in their organization a voice in improving the score. If you come from a Microsoft 365 background, you probably used to using the word collaboration. And that's what I call this, a collaboration principle, because knowing the score and sharing the score, those are challenging to be sure, but giving everyone a voice, incredibly challenging. And it's where many, many companies are just failing to meet expectations. What happens when you actually effectively execute on this? Well, according to this research from Deloitte, amazing things happen, right? If you actually have a good learning and collaborative culture, you're the first to market with more things. People are more productive. There are less sick days. The organizations are more profitable. It creates great places to work, places where people wake up on Monday morning and say, you know what, I'm looking forward to going into work because I get to solve problems. I get to live up to the highest and best sense of what I was created as a human being to do instead of being treated like a robot. But there are challenges, and I alluded to those earlier. When business leaders, the authors of this book, Boundary Spanning Leadership, were asked, what is the most important thing? What's the most important skill for you to have in your organization to meet your goals, to survive in the 21st century? The number one answer, with 86% answering, was collaboration is critical. This idea of humans working with humans to do things better is the most critical skill. And then they asked another question: are you good at it? And only 7% said they're good at it, a whopping 79% gap. To me, one of the exciting things, and from where I sit and from where many of you sit, we actually have a voice, a role in helping to improve how our organizations collaborate, right? If we take up the mantle and pursue it, it's not just a technology role, it's a role of changing culture and philosophy and the way we interact with each other as human beings. It is an amazing time to be alive and be in business because what we realize is this idea of employee engagement. It's not driven by benefits and salaries and casual dress codes and remote work, which we all have to do nowadays. All those are nice things. We want all those benefits to be sure. But what we've found is employees really engage when they make a difference, when they actually help to drive and improve the customer experience. I'm not saying that's a silver bullet. That's not going to work for every employee. But what I am saying is those employees who are willing to engage, those employees who are willing to go above and beyond, work those extra hours, push themselves to innovate, not make excuses, but find creative ways to serve customers, to bring on board new customers, to find great ways to collaborate with their coworkers. They're ones who feel like they can actually make a difference. And in an organization, what does making a difference mean? It really means living up to your purpose as an organization, which is to serve a customer. Whether you're a government, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're for profit, that's what we all exist, to serve a customer. That's why all of our businesses exist. So one way that one organization did this is they looked and said, okay, we buy into this idea that every employee has a number. And one of the things they did with their Dynamics implementation was they said, we have a very decentralized, in this case, sales team. All the other customers, all the other employees had other numbers, but sales team, very decentralized. They got them together and they brainstormed, gang, what metric, what activity, what thing drives results as far as you can tell. And they deliberated over it. They gave everyone a voice in coming up with metrics. They came up with a lot of them. They decided they would shift the metric every 3 to 6 months. But their first metric, they said, was in-person visits. This was pre-COVID, so this is now shifted to calls. But they said in-person visits absolutely makes the most difference. Not the number of deals in the pipeline, or just how many people can we meet face to face each day. So they said that's our metric. The red line on this chart, that was their baseline. The green line, that was their target. The purple jaggy, that's their actual results. You can see that once they started measuring this, they changed the behavior permanently. It never went back. Yes, they had a few valleys every now and then and slow seasons or when they had a little bit of turnover, but by and large, they blew past their highest expectation and stayed past it. Now, operationally, the way they did this was they said, look, everybody's in different places doing their thing with customers, but you're going to all enter your information into Dynamics. From Dynamics, we're going to take all of that and put it into Power BI to create this report. From there, we're going to take that report and we're going to put it into Microsoft Teams because we want you to collaborate, to share why are you doing better than someone else? How can you encourage that person to do better? This is a round table. It's not top down. You guys work with each other to drive this behavior that you decided yourselves was the most important behavior to drive. That created unbelievable results for them. So listen, understand, connect, and know. If you've heard me before, you've probably heard me use the words powered by luck. So those are the first 4 skills that organizations that do customer experiences well do different from other organizations. Now, as we looked at all this, we kind of found this a number of years ago. We felt there was still something missing. There was this undefinable something that we saw some organizations do well with, others did not. And it came to us one day, like most of this did, when we were meeting with a client. And it was a good meeting. They got it. They were really charging ahead with this. They were being very, very effective and productive. And we asked ourselves why. Well, they left the room for a while. It was a boardroom. And we kind of got up and stretched our legs. And someone looked in the wall and said, I love their mission. And when you looked at their mission, I can't remember all the words, but it was about people, right? It was like, well, we're going to serve our customers this way. And we're going to serve our customers' customers as a manufacturer. So they sold to distributors who sold to customers. We're going to serve them this way in this industry this way. And by the way, we're going to serve our suppliers and vendors this way and our employees this way. And by the way, if we do all these things well, we think we're going to make a profit. And we scratched our heads and looked at that and said, could this be that undefined something we've been struggling with? I'm a numbers guy, so I had to pull some numbers on it. But ultimately, we came to call this principle the idea of good luck. The idea here being that anybody can do listen, understand, connect, and know, but not everyone is doing it for the right reasons. Good luck is the core value, right? It's the why you do these things. It's your purpose for doing those things. And the numbers actually support this. When you look at the numbers around more purpose-driven organizations versus those that are not purpose-driven, it tells a very clear story about the effectiveness of culture and driving and changing behavior. But what does that mean for Dynamics 365 and CRM projects, right? Is that just well, it's either benefits from or it's a victim of the culture? Not at all. It actually has a cultural role to play in and of itself among those who are doing it well. Now, one of the things that Harvard Business Review found is they looked at this type of principle in our digital workplaces. They came to realize that if digital tools are not management and leadership tools, then they are not nearly as effective. This research essentially says when organizations are strong in digital management and leadership, meaning not just they have digital tools, but managers and leaders use the tools as management and leadership tools, not just something they're giving away to the next generation and saying, you guys use it, that's not in my job description, but something they're actually saying, this is as much my tool as it is your tool. There's an absolute difference in revenue growth. And when you look closer at it, those are the companies that said, we need to have coaches helping our managers and leaders into this new generation because it's intimidating for them. And we need to have a roadmap and a clear digital vision for getting there. Now, as we looked at all of this, we started to ask ourselves, what really makes the difference among our clients for those who are the most effective and the least effective in creating great customer engagement. There's a long list of items. For this slide, I just wanted to name 7 of them to give you a little bit of the counterintuitive reality if you're dabbling with Dynamics or maybe you're struggling with Dynamics. So we see a lot of companies spend a lot of time on the first 2 there. We really need to select the right software, right? Lots of time and effort and discipline is put into selecting software. And I'm not saying you shouldn't focus on it, but a lot of time is put into that. The other area of investment is a lot of internal time is generally put into configuring. In fact, we've heard many organizations tell us we want this to work so well that people would just want to use it. I can tell you from practical experience, I've seen some amazingly well configured CRM systems. I've never seen one that has just been adopted because people just wanted to adopt it. I have seen some incredibly poorly configured ones, including ones built on Lotus Notes, if you remember what that is, that were incredibly well adopted. Now, looking at the rest of these things, cross-functional steering committees, managers that themselves become power users of the product. They don't just delegate it. C-level executives using the numbers out of CRM to make better decisions. Analyzing your culture to do a better job of understanding how CRM will be adopted and how you can change culture, and a focus on continuous improvement. When you look at all of these, the top 2 probably get more focus than the bottom 5 do. And the bottom 5 are by far and away the hallmarks of organizations that are successful and effective with their CRM implementations. One particular case in point here, one organization did a cultural analysis. We worked with them to do some surveying, to do a cultural analysis. They actually found that for one cultural item, which we call elasticity, they were within the normative range, but they're actually closer to the center than they should have been. They're a commercial organization, and they should have been, if you try to understand this picture here a little bit, they should have been deeper into the commercial range. They did not have this can do whatever it takes to make the customer happy, to innovate something new type of mentality. So while they realized they were in the acceptable range, they weren't in the range they felt like they needed to be to actually grow and meet their goals as an organization. So the first thing they did was they understood that and some other cultural drivers to say, these are the things that are going to be difficult and challenging for us about adopting a CRM platform. Let's pay attention to that and pay special attention to, we've got to have onboard leadership. We've got to have champions among our users, and we've got to have a persistent focus on driving adoption to make this happen. But the other thing they did was they said, let's use this project to actually foster a cultural change within our organization to push that rating more and more towards the right. Obviously, not beyond the normative range, but deeper into the normative range for their type of business. By contrast, by the way, another one of our clients went through the cultural analysis. Their leadership team absolutely rejected it, didn't feel like it described them very well, and kind of moved on and did things their way. They themselves felt closer to that cult-like mentality among the leadership team. The rest of their team wasn't quite as strong on that. And it was indicative of a leadership team that was completely out of touch with the reality of their employees and the reality of their customers. And that organization continues to struggle to this day. So Dynamics, any kind of CRM project, has a story to tell about understanding your culture to drive adoption. And by the way, we found the same to be true with Microsoft 365, SharePoint Teams, intranets, that kind of stuff. But it also has an absolute story to tell in terms of when you understand your culture, use it as a vehicle to change your culture, to improve your culture, to make you a better version of who you are. None of us are perfectly living up to the cultural standard we want to have. Use your investment in Dynamics to do that better. So here's a luck principle. If I try to summarize everything I was saying in my session today in one slide, this is it with lots of hashtags to call out the actions that are happening in each one of those things. It's about listening to people, understanding them at a deeper level through better analytics, connecting with them by having consistent and repeatable but flexible processes, knowing our results so you can continuously improve, and using good luck, having a purpose behind all that, not just to say, here are 4 things we're going to do better, but here's why we do those things. Here's who we are. Here's the motivation behind wanting to do these things better and better all the time. We call that being powered by luck. My goal in life, in business life, is to help people and organizations be transformed by becoming more and more powered by luck, both personally and collectively within their businesses. Because look, profit is a pulse of an organization. but people are the heart, right? When you stop your buddy in the street and say, hey, how are you doing? That guy or gal doesn't go, hang on a second, 65 beats per minute, I'm doing excellent. Of course not. Pulse is incredibly important, but it's not our reason for being. CRM can speak to both of those. Yes, it can help us with our pulse, but it can go far beyond that. And organizations who get that are organizations who've actually drawn a great deal of great adoption stories together. Some resources for you before we move on to our other speakers. Again, you can contact me. My name is Geoff Ables. My contact information is there. And if you like the luck principle, it's available on Amazon. There's a link you can go hit to go grab yourself a copy. If you want to learn more about this idea of CPR for CRM, why CRM projects do struggle and fail, and what some organizations are doing about it, there's a great free ebook there. You can hit our website, put in your contact info, and you can download a copy of that. And of course, this is what we do for a living. So if you'd like to partner with C5 Insight, either for consulting like we were talking about today, or implementation of Dynamics or Microsoft 365, or just for support questions and answers, we're here to do that. We find that very fulfilling, especially when we can connect it to something beyond just cool technical stuff, which we love to do, but actually helping to impact the lives of people who these systems are touching. So grab all that contact information. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you again. Have a great day. Take care.